just a wee video from another person on the internet with thoughts and feelings around grief and my experience with pet loss. How did I soothe the lumps and bumps of my sadness? Stick around because I do have some ideas if you are experiencing the loss of a pet or a loved one. Cue the snippets. If you've known me since 2013, then you'll know my best friend and soulmate, a small, white, fluffy, multi-shit called Nash. Nash has been with me through some of the harder moments in my life. He's been everything to me in the last 11 years, and unfortunately, we lost him January of this year to heart failure. I wanted to share my experience of grieving over the last few months. I wanted to initially just touch base on the fact that I was incredibly, I felt incredibly held, and I felt incredibly surprised with the amount of love I'd received about the blog I wrote, which I recommend reading, which was about losing him. I had expected to have a very disenfranchised grief, and for anyone who has been in therapy and heard that term, that refers to grief that society typically doesn't understand or doesn't like to honour. So thinking about miscarriages or people who lose loved ones to suicide, or pet loss where, certain members of community might not deem it that big a deal, depending on worldview and culture. In my case, I've never seen so many people just reaching out and sending their love, and I've never, the two humans I've lost to death, I didn't receive this many flowers. And again, that brings me to the other surprise, which is that I thought I understood grief. But this, what I'm experiencing now, is far more immense and intense. A good friend of mine gave me a heads up. She said, guilt is going to latch on to everything. And it does that, I believe, because the mind, the soul, feels so helpless. Any kind of loss to death has got to be the ultimate form of helplessness for whoever's left behind. The mind just cannot make sense of it. I mean, there's plenty of situations where we don't have control, but the mind can at least perceive control. And when it comes to a loss to death, it just can't do that. And for me, the guilt really does latch on to everything. It feels like a way to process what's happening. It feels like a way to regain some control. Focusing on all the moments that I was snippy with him, the moments I prioritized the baby over him, being burnt out toddler parent, trying to navigate sick dog, baby, and I didn't do a good enough job. I failed him. I don't focus on the fact that he lay on our bed every night. I don't focus on the fact that he went everywhere with me, everywhere except for overseas for the last 11 years. The amount of dates before I met my wife, the amount of dates that I either cancelled or left early to go and be with my dog and hang out with him and watch some delicious trashy TV together. I just focus on the times that I perceive myself as being a failure to him. But I'm also mindful it's all crap, and we can't do that to ourselves chronically. We have to focus on the nuance. We have to focus on the experience prior to when our loved one's sick or suddenly dies or whatever the journey may have been. That there's a whole story there. There's so much more nuance than just these last kind of tense, hard moments. The other thing I'm surprised by with this really intense grief, and I'm sure this is the case for many people that lose loved ones they're close to, is we're not just grieving the loss of the being and the relationship. In my case, it's a little dog, but also the rituals, anything that's intimately a part of our day-to-day lives. Nash was, every morning we had to go for a walk, and every night he'd kind of prompt me to go to bed. It was time for belly rubs and a book or TV. He would ground me in some sense of routine and rhythm. Well before I had a child, he would also beckon me to be a little bit more responsible in life. I had to think ahead and plan and make sure I looked after him and cared for him. I think that that's a big part of this as well. Every time we get in the car, come on, hop in the car, all of that's gone, and I do think that's a legitimate thing. I've heard people talk about this before. There's a grief in the routine. There's the silence in the house that is deafening. You hear that all the time, and I think that's what that is. There's so many experts, by the way, who can support you with understanding grief and telling you how to grieve. I am an anti-expert. So if you want an expert, stop watching. I know at this point you're probably thinking, Brie, I'm a little bit flat listening. So far we've talked about grief, death, and a dog dying. Will we be taking a U-turn at any stage? Yes, we will, because I've made a diagram. The intersection of science, philosophy, and spirituality is what I'm about to offer you. As you can see at the top, the 3 stages of pet grief. Best mate dies. So that's the worst bit. And of course, a mixture of emotions: denial, anger, bargaining. It calls for someone coming over, making us a cup of tea and giving us a bit of a chalky biscuit. The second phase of losing a pet or loved one that I've noticed is it's shit. So you get a lot of this really well-intended toxic positivity, I've noticed. I know someone whose dog died and cat died and their indoor plant died, so at least a lot of that. That's okay, that's just people doing their thing. But really it is shit, so don't worry about any of that. You're allowed to feel shit. Sit in the shit. And then of course we're moving into spirituality now with the third phase, which is it's still quite shit. And what I mean by that is we can't force or push against grief like it's some project. There's no hack here other than time and leaning on people you trust. And if you're really lucky, you might know someone who actually has lived experience of a grief, which I was lucky enough to have. I had a friend who had lost loved ones before and had actually lost a dog not long before. So yeah, we were an awesome support to each other. And it was nice actually speaking to someone who understood the guilt part of it as well, because she could kind of call out my guilt. But I know that we want a quick fix to grief, and some people grieve their entire lives to a point where they don't function very well, which is really sad. You know, you see these people that just do not recover from loss, and of course for those people some kind of professional help, whether it's talk therapy or group therapy or something lovely, and the community kind of gathering around. But it's okay for this to be utterly painful while it needs to be, because that is our relationship being processed, right? We're processing the loss of such a deep, beautiful love. That quote is, grief is love with nowhere to go. Scientists define death as the irreversible functionality of the biological bits and bobs. To me, death feels like a concept because everything decomposes and recycles and renews, like everything. I couldn't imagine that wouldn't happen when we cross over. And yes, I've had gorgeous woo-woo experiences, I think. So it's down to your worldview and culture, but I'm not too worried. I have a feeling crossing over would feel like going home. With the loss of Nash, I just had no idea how much he informed my identity. And since I've lost him, I feel like I'm running in circles trying to find myself again. And perhaps there is, in this bizarre way, a huge part of my heart that's gone with him, which is ironic because he died of heart failure. But I think that's okay. That makes sense to me. And perhaps new things will fill that space. Perhaps some gold will fill in the cracks like kintsugi. Kintsugi is a beautiful metaphor, by the way, for grief and trauma. I think that's normal, and I think that, again, takes time, openness, and not pushing and not forcing anything, but just moving through the grief. My only tip, I suppose, more from a counsellor mindset, which is my day job, is watching for chronic isolation. I do feel like we need time and space to be with ourselves and just be quite sacred with immediate people around us. But co-regulating with others who care for you and that you trust with love and softness, regardless of your view, regardless of whether you're a stoic and you're too cool for hugs, just let them in for a little bit, because the one thing that we all can connect on, every one of us will deal with loss while we're alive. All of us. So bizarrely, Western culture sets us up to fail by not talking about death. It's sort of weird because it is the one thing we all know. We all know so well. So there's a pretty good chance that someone out there, if you're willing to open up, will actually really empathize with this experience. Sometimes that's nurturing, and maybe you deserve to be nurtured and have a bowl of nachos. I want to thank you for watching this video. If it's the end of the video and you're here, you're a very kind person. I'd like to be friends with you. You can message me if you like, and I'll message back. But for now, I'm craving a Monte Carlo biscuit and a cup of Joseph. So I'm going to end it here. You take good care, and I'm sending you lots of love. E nohora. Little dog flying in the sky. Don't be unhappy, be gay or bi.
Thanks, Brisas.